Welcome to Small Business Accelerator, the podcast where we help small businesses create more new opportunities and win more new business. Today's topic is getting the targeting right. Join our hosts, Blair Carey, founder of InsideCRO, and David Wuensch, founder of EPOCH Sales Management Solutions, as they dig deep with today's guest, Ryan Reisert. Ryan co-authored Outbound Sales, No Fluff, and leads a company based on the concept of its name, Phone Ready Leads.
Well, hello all. We're excited today to continue our journey on Small Business Accelerator, helping small businesses create more new business opportunities. And with me today is Blair Carey. Blair, introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, my name is Blair Carey. I run a small sales development team that helps small businesses find more business, keep more business, and grow their pipeline.
And my name is David Wuensch with EPOCH Sales Management Solutions, and we help small B2B business owners make their sales team better. And Blair and I have hooked up, and we're excited over the next few weeks, months, or however long we stay together. Doing this is just how do we help small businesses accelerate, get more new opportunities. And today, Blair, we're gonna be talking about getting the targeting right, one of the most important steps in the process.
Absolutely. If you don't have the targeting right, it doesn't matter how good your product is or even how good your messaging is. If the targeting is wrong, it just all falls on deaf ears.
And our guest today, Ryan Reisert, in fact, he's the one that introduced us to each other.
That's right.
I thoroughly enjoyed his book, Outbound Sales, No Fluff. And of course, the subtitle is what everybody loves, written by two millennials who've actually sold something this decade. So Ryan is going to be joining us today, and we're going to dig into some of the key topics with respect to targeting. Blair, you know Ryan well.
Yeah, we do. I've known him for about three and a half years. We've been working on a number of projects together, so it's gonna be a fun one, that's for sure.
Well, Blair, Ryan is here. You want to introduce our guest today?
So Ryan and I go, I don't know, back for a few different companies. We're doing some great work right now with him and the work that he's doing with his phone ready leads. And he's kind of the guy who helped me figure out the concept of how to build a proper target list. So I'm really excited to have him here to have this conversation with us today.
So I guess, Ryan, when we say get targeting right, what are some of the first things that come to mind for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for having me on the show, by the way. I'm excited to join you guys and have this conversation today. For whatever reason, targeting and list is a thing that most people just completely forget about when they're building their go-to-market and their sales process. And it's literally the very first thing that you need to have right. In order to be successful, right? Target is the number one thing that's going to lead to success. Even if you're a terrible rep, if you have good targeting, you're probably going to be successful. And if you're a great rep and you have bad targeting, you're probably not going to be successful. So when we talk about targeting, it's as simple as who are the folks that you actually can help. It's as simple as that. And it's actually broken down into two components, right? You target companies in the B2B landscape, right? The company is ultimately your target. The company is ultimately your customer, but it's the people within those companies that are the ones you're going to be prospecting into, right? And so that's where it starts to get a little bit more complex, but you've got to target companies and you sell to people, and the targeting component of your strategy is as simple as making sure that the companies in the first place are people that have a problem or are experiencing a pain or not aware of an opportunity that you're disrupting or supporting it. And that's the simple component. We can dive deeper into it, but when we talk about targeting, that's the number one component. Is you target companies, they're your customers, and you sell to people. And those are the two things you need to solve for when you're building your list strategy.
I love what you said there about how we're targeting companies, but we sell to people. And I think that that's one of the things that we see in today's modern remote and field sales environment is that we forget that we're actually trying to sell to people. And the human to human connection is the most important way that we need to do that. And even though we're using SMSs and we're using WhatsApp or Signal or Vidyard or any of those kinds of technologies, ultimately we're trying to create a human face that creates a human connection, because we're saying, hey, look, we help people just like you all the time with these problems. But the biggest problem is we don't know whether we can help somebody when we first have a conversation with them, and until we have that first conversation with them.
Well, and you nailed it there too, because this is where it gets a little complex, because you may, in a B2B landscape, you may have a solution that helps the business in certain ways. Right? There's a business impact. You created the solution to, I don't know, accelerate revenue, as an example, right? We have a problem getting phone ready leads. We have a problem getting people on the phone. Okay. The business problem for that is no pipeline, no revenue, frustrated people, whatever, right? But the people problem, who's responsible for that, right? And why do they care? And a lot of times, again, we're talking about targeting, so I don't want to get into the messaging component of it, but we're targeting the wrong people with the wrong message. And that's where people get this the frustration as well when it comes to strategy. On the target side is, the company itself has some sort of problem, but the people don't necessarily see the problem in the same lens.
Right.
Right. And I think that's where a lot of people get really, I don't know, confused. Right.
Yeah.
Because in the human to human interaction, you don't want to reach out and say, hey, I help your business do these things. If I'm in a certain role, I don't really care. Right. I just don't care. So what?
Right.
Go away. And that's where people struggle, because they can't seem to communicate why it makes sense to you, Blair.
Right.
Versus you, David.
Yeah. So obviously, right target, right message, right medium, right time are the four variables that all matter, as we go to take a look at this stuff. And today we're focused on targeting. Yep. Certainly it gets impacted by the other three. With respect to that, one of the things, Blair and I were talking about offline is some of the challenges I have had recently of getting clients to really be specific about their ideal client profile, your swim lane, whatever whatever label you want to put on that. Mm-hmm. So what, in your experience of working with people to try to help them really pare it down, what have been some of the keys to have them be able to successfully just get that ideal client profile precise, or I should say ideal client profiles precise in what they're trying to do?
Yeah, that's it's to this day the biggest challenge that I have working with companies is everybody wants to sell to everybody. Right? Everybody has a problem that I can solve. Everybody's our client, and when you do get more specific, it's still very generic, because it's this more is better mindset. Right. And it's really difficult for people to realize that, look, if you slow down, if you actually get more precise, if you get smaller, you're going to get bigger faster. Let me say that again. If you get smaller, you slow down, you take the time to really think about not who's the next 10,000 people you could sell to, but who's the next 5, who's the next 10, who's the next 100. In my book, I talk about trying to get to 100 priorities. These are people that you know are in this swim lane, and pick up the phone. If you can get there and you maintain that number as a rep, it gets really easy. Sales gets really easy if it's really your next best customer in that list. So when I'm working with folks, everybody wants to go big. Everyone says, we got thousands, we have tens of thousands. When I hear that, I go, hold on a second. Who are your best customers right now? What makes them your best customer and why? And what can we learn from that to go get the next 5 and then the next 10? And again, ideally to 100, right? And if you can't name the next 5, like bang, 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 right? By name, we have a problem. And then when you do name those next 5 by name, and there's no commonalities, there's no kind of there's no way to expand on that, right? This
Right.
concept of a beachhead, right? If I
Right.
say, hey, David, who's your next five? If you could wave a magic wand and ideally select your next 5 customers, who are they? And one's in one industry and another's in another industry and another's, $1 billion
Mhm.
company and one's a startup. What is it that might be, there might be something there. I don't know yet, but I'd ask the next
Right.
question, like, why is it
Yeah.
that?
So,
It,
so everybody has a different. So as you bring that up and you direct it, I mean, I'll give an example. I mean, I primarily work with small B2B businesses with 10 to 250 employees.
Mhm.
Well, and now that I don't have to worry about just having people within 25 miles of my office, thanks to the pandemic, and people are more open to meeting like this and things of that sort. So I ended up selecting. I didn't say I'm going to go across the nation. I picked 16 metro areas that I wanted to work on. So that I could go a metro at a time when I build my lists, as opposed to being countrywide. And I picked those cities strategically. I have personal reasons why each city's on the list. Well, here's the thing, they're all second connections. So I have 7,000 second connection prospects that fit my bill. Well, it just so happens I went to a small school in north of New York City on the Hudson River, and of those 7,000, between 160 and 170 of them are all Service Academy graduates. So who are my dream accounts? Oh no, wait, let me back that up. Of the 10 to 250, if we pare it down to the 50 to 250 employees and Service Academy graduates, I now narrow that list down to 160 to 170. Again, all second connections. So I have really taken a 7,000 list and pared it down to between 150 and 200. That's even a more tighter prospect, right? So anyway, I think that's what you're talking about, is that mindset.
Well, yeah, and then I would ask the question. So, what is it about the size? So you have a specific, it's SMB size of employees. Why is that? Why is that size matter? What is that?
Okay.
What's the
Great
reason
question.
for that?
Well,
Right.
either the business owner themselves is playing the role of the sales manager, or there is a sales manager, and there's less than 10 salespeople. And so I'm trying to deal with companies that all have the same problem of, it's just a handful of salespeople, and how do they get the job done? And so it's the 1 to 10 sales. The real issue is it's 1 to 10 salespeople. That's really what I'm working on.
See, and so we're already getting better at your targeting. You don't care about the employee count, you care about the salespeople. And so now all of a sudden we're already getting a little bit better at identifying what it is, and then the why. The why is the most important piece here now. Is what is it about the business at that stage of 1 to 10 salespeople that makes you somebody that they'd want to connect with, right? What's the
Wow.
problems that they have, and then once you start to understand those problems, David, then you start to get another theme. What is it about those problems that might be relevant within one industry versus another industry, or one region of the country versus another region of the country? Or
Yeah.
you continue to, that's what
Right.
helped you start
Yeah.
to whittle that down to something that's
Yeah. Blair, have you got an account that comes to mind on this that you'd like to, share as an example on this?
No, look, I mean, realistically, because we work with emerging technology companies that are going after industrial customers, okay? So these are people that are in water, wastewater, oil and gas, energy, utilities. They're all over the place. Basically, what we're looking at is we're focused on helping those emerging technology companies reach those different types of customers. And the ideal buyer persona is different for each industry and for each type of customer. And we don't really know it until we actually start having conversations with people. We have what I call a hypothetical client profile or client persona. Right. But unless you have sold to that specific industry 100 times, there's no way you can say that you know who your ideal client persona is.
Right. So
it's like I say, there's 3 different types of client personas. There's the dream client, okay? There's the ideal client, and then there's the one that pays the bills. And the one that pays the bills is the one that you want to have. And if they all have some kind of commonality, like what Ryan has been talking about, then you can actually do something on the targeting side.
Well, I would challenge that a little bit. Blair, as a friendly conversation here though, is as you start as a startup for sure, like, let's get money in the door so we survive. But as you start to scale up, there is a difference between those who will pay you and those who you really want to be doing business with, because
Right.
the impact of doing business with anyone who just gives you a check, it can be a challenge. It can be a big challenge. It could kill your business, right? And you don't even know
Right.
it.
Right. But that's a fair statement. But I think what I'm trying to say is that many small business owners think that their ideal client is this person or this type of organization, but in fact it's not. Okay. What it really is it's the person that is your existing client. And so, Josh Braun, who we all know, has this fantastic framework called Jobs to Be Done, which is based on a couple of different books primarily by Clay Christensen, who was a professor at Harvard Business School, right? And what he basically says is interview your existing customers and find out what the jobs are that they need to be done and why they're doing it, and then solve the problem there.
That brings up an excellent point. I mean, in helping clients determine who their ideal client profile is, or what is the right swim lane and the right person, what recommendations do you have, Ryan?
I mean, what Blair just mentioned in Josh's process, which is again based off of Clay Christensen's Jobs to Be Done framework, that's a really good place to start. Most people, they think that's a breakthrough way of doing things, but the reality is that should be fairly trivial, right? If I want to expand my business, then I want to know, who are my customers today? Why are they choosing to work with us today? What was the problem that they had when they chose to work with us in the first place? Why are they going to continue to want to work with us over the next several years, right? Not just now, but over time. And once I understand that information, it can really help me identify who else might look like them. And it's a lookalike, right? And marketing is kind of this beachhead concept, right? What are those? What did I glean from that conversation that allows me to then identify the attributes of an organization that looks and feels like the person I'm helping today, right? And a lot of times we get caught up in things like size and industry and vertical or whatever, but this Jobs to Be Done concept simplifies it. It's a who within that, again, target companies sell to people. So who within that organization might be experiencing the same problems, and that becomes an ideal target.
Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Blair?
No, I think what I wanted to say is beyond this sort of concept of jobs to be done, okay, is that the concept of the lookalike is based on not just many times the targeting methodology is what Ryan has said: size of company, industry, however you define industry, and then by title of the organization. And we can't forget that there are people who have functional roles within an organization, and there are people who have hierarchical or seniority roles within an organization.
Right.
And just because someone's title says senior something or director of something or VP of something doesn't mean that he might actually be trying to solve the problem that you're trying to help get solved.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's huge. That's a big part once you get past the organizational targeting, right? Target company. Now let's get within the organization themselves. Now you're talking about the Jobs to Be Done concept. Who within that organization is either going to get fired, is going to get promoted, is going to have a better way of life because of the conversation that you're going to bring to them, right? And the fired or promoted concept makes it simple too. Like you make them look like a rock star, or you reduce their risk, right? You're making them and that's very simple, right? So if you think about it in that context, who owns it? Who owns it within an organization?
Yeah, who is the CEO of that problem?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great way. Dave, that's a great way of thinking about it.
There's somebody who has a term similar to that, and I don't remember who it is off the top of my head, but it may be Hunter. I forget who it is that has this, but it's something like, the CEO of the problem. I think that's good. I guess a couple of things I'll share. And that, unfortunately, I love having a millennial, joining this thing, but here's the baby boomer that'll end up sharing. I even go back to Miller Hyman in a book from many, many years ago about ideal client profiles. Just who were your best customers and describe them. Who are your worst customers and describe them.
Yeah.
What's the opposite of those characteristics? What are these characteristics? What are all these? In the last 12 to 24 months, who have been your best and worst customers, and let's describe them and lay them out what they are. As a starting point, and then who is the person that was the CEO of the problem there, right?
Right.
Well, you nailed it there, and I think there's an important piece that you bring to that, which we forget about. And this goes right back to what I talked about at the very beginning, where we're trying to whittle down small, right? Small becomes large, right? Small goes,
right.
Slow goes fast. However you want to think through that. I was just meeting with one of my partners this week, and the woman who runs operations, a light bulb went off in my head too. She said, it's not just about the positives. It's even more in software. Like, engineers think about also the negatives, right? The exclusions are actually almost more important than the inclusions when you're trying to get this
right.
nailed. And you just mentioned that it's not just the positives, but who are the worst customers,
right.
And what does that look like, so we can avoid that? Because the more we can chop out, the better. It's not about adding. It's really about getting focused.
Yeah, and we have to remember that sales primarily, especially outbound prospecting, cold prospecting, is as much about disqualification as it is about qualification. And the way that I view it as a sales development leader is that there is absolutely no way that you get to talk to my CEO, my founder, my co-founder, my account executive, my SVP of sales until you get through me. And that's a completely different mindset that most people have. And that's the reason why people like working with guys like me.
Yeah, it's good. But I'll throw the other one in going after ideal client profiles. Michael Padone is the one I actually heard this from, which I think everybody knows. It's just using data enrichment tools. If you turn around and just take a list of your existing customers, or if you've got a long list, the top 20% of your customers or whatever you do, and just put those websites into Zoom Info, into Uplead, any one of those, and it's going to give you all the doggone demographics you need, right? So that becomes a good way of turn around and take care of, with respect to that. I think we've really spent a lot of time on ideal client profiles.
It's all part of targeting, though, right? Realistically.
I agree. But I think so it's one thing to have that, but I think Brian also talked about the importance of, concrete lists. Mike Weinberg has the finite, workable,
sure,
whatever his terms are, but it's that same thing. Ryan's talking about, just make a specific number. Who are the 5? Who are the 20? Who are the 100? Whatever. I think it's having a specific list for that, for this month, for this week, for today, right?
Right.
What else you want to add there, Ryan?
Well, that's the principle of my process that I call buckets, right? Like, you get so focused on who is the person right now that's closest to this next action that I need to generate revenue. And as a salesperson, we're pretty good at this. Once we've had a meeting, right? Stage definitions, exit criteria in our opportunity pipeline, right? We know scheduled, intro, discovery, demo, whatever, presentation, proposal, negotiation, whatever, close.
Tech review, contract review. Yeah.
We don't do a good job of doing that until that meeting. And that's what this is all about, right? It's about putting a structured stage definition and exit criteria in your list to get you to a meeting. And it starts with the ideal target. I call it the swim lane. But once you've started working that list, not all of those contacts are created equally. Right? Some of those folks you can reach, some of them you can't. And you want to get to a point where you're only working a list that's workable, right, in a channel that you could reach them, and it's enough to keep you moving through what I call your mouth of sales, right? Which you should know all the way through.
So here's what I've taken away from Ryan in your bucket system is you've got to put in the right effort in bucket 1 to create bucket 2, but it's all about discipline yourself to have a good bucket 2 and work bucket 2 so you have the benefit of working bucket 3 and 4 to where you actually get opportunities in business.
100%. Yeah, all the heavy lifting is done. All the heavy lifting is done. I repeat it all the time. The list is the strategy. The list is the strategy.
Right. You might want to share for all listeners, what is bucket 1, 2, 3, and 4, for their benefit.
Yeah. So 4 buckets. The first bucket is uncontacted. So again, these are the prospects at companies that you think you could help, like we just talked about, and they're the people within those companies that own the problem, the CEOs of those problems, right? But you have not attempted them yet. You've just researched them. They're on your list, right? That's uncontacted. That's bucket 1. Bucket 2 is working. In order to get from bucket 1 to bucket 2, the exit criteria is that you've attempted them and you've documented the path and you're confident that it's worth attempting them again. So if you're attempting them over the phone, the way to get to working means that you got to their voicemail. That number working. And there's a couple different buckets within that now that I segment into 4 different buckets. We won't get that detailed right now, but that's pretty generic, right? Like a lot of people will actually try to put leads in their database that you call, and you get to a gatekeeper that won't pass you through a voicemail. You get to a customer service line that won't get you through. You get to an IVR that has no path. And you have reps calling those numbers over and over and over and over again. If you can't get to a voicemail, don't call that number again. It's not working. It's well, you just have to find more contact information, or it's out of your buckets, right? So that's working. From uncontacted working, you attempt and you validate it, right? And I have multiple buckets into that now. If you want to learn more about that later, feel free to reach out. So that's what phone release is all about. But the next step is so say it's email. For email, in order to go from uncontacted to working, is the email delivers, right? Again, people will spend a ton of time crafting emails to people, personalizing them without testing that they're even deliverable, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's great tools these days, like Outreach and Sales Loft, whatever. It's like, hey, research, boom, put it into a very first step email that's pretty generic. That's basically, it used to always be, quick question, right? Quick question gets a pretty high open rate, and it's just a very, very generic, pain-oriented 3-sentence email. You don't need to do any personalization. All you're doing is seeing if the damn thing delivers. Now, if it delivers, then you can now move it into working. Now I'll spend some time actually personalizing this email, right? If it's social, check the profile. Does it look like they are active on that channel or not? Is it just a resume? Are they even there? And believe it or not, like some people will spend time in sequences. So that's the idea, to go from from uncontacted to working. You actually make sure that it's worth going back to that channel again. If it's not, you don't add that as a next task, or
you stop
whatever.
The sequence.
You stop that sequence or cadence or task or whatever you're doing in your workflow in that channel. Okay.
Right.
So then the third bucket is priority. Well, now priority is, I've actually reached you on the phone. We've had a conversation. On email, you've responded. On social, we're engaged. We can DM, that type of thing, right? And then the fourth bucket is we've scheduled time to meet. Meeting scheduled. Right? You've agreed to meet, and those are the 4 simple buckets. And if, as a rep, what you want to do is you want to get these buckets built in such a way that when you're working on a day-to-day basis, you can get that priority bucket. If you're a full cycle rep, that's at least 50. If you're like a prospector, 100. When you get to that number, it becomes super simple to get enough daily conversations, which is the only metric that matters, by the way. And now it's not just conversations, it's completions.
Right.
Which is we've had a conversation and there's an outcome, a yes or no, not me, not now. But you want enough daily conversations to make things work. You get that number to about 50 to 100 in that bucket 3, or that priority, meaning if I do work in this list on that record, I'm going to get a response at a very high connect rate, right?
Right.
That priority phone list will connect between 30 and 50% of the time. that email response will be very high because they've responded before, assuming it's relevant. Otherwise, you should get them out of there. The at least the opens are going to be almost 100%, right? At least it should be, right? These are the people that are responding on social. If that's a channel that you're activating, you're getting more information, you're gathering information, you're moving a deal forward. You want to get that number to 50 to 100. That's that list that you're talking about, that priority list. That's why it's called priority. You get it at that level and it meets all those other criteria, you're cooking with gas. That's the
Right.
secret sauce right there.
Yep. I certainly agree.
And the biggest
go ahead,
channel, the biggest challenge that most active prospectors have is keeping the flow moving, because basically what happens is people start prospecting at the beginning of the quarter. They build their list. They start running the buckets. They start validating and moving them through, and then they get so inundated with deals that are in the pipeline. They're so busy with pipeline management, they stop doing the prospecting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then we're in this vicious cycle, up and down and up and down and up and down.
So Ryan, I could probably talk with you about this topic for hours, and I know you and Blair talk about it a minute or two every week. But why don't you take a few minutes and talk about phone ready leads? If you want to share where you're at with that and what's going on for the audience and how they get a hold of you if they have any other questions about any of this stuff.
Yeah, sure. So phone ready leads is the exhaust of what we just talked about. Bucket is the bucketing system. The hardest part in maintaining that flow of data, as Blair said, is actually doing the heavy lifting from bucket 1 to bucket 2, and particularly the heavy lifting in bucket 1 to bucket 2 using the phone. And believe it or not, using the phone and running validation from bucket 1 to 2, attempting the number and realizing if it's worth calling or not, can inform your entire list strategy. And it's literally the most important piece in the process, but it's also the most pain in the butt piece of the process as a sales rep. No one wants to make a bunch of calls that lead to nowhere. No one documents the path, etc. So what phone ready leads is it's basically your Disneyland fast pass to your list of essentially priorities, but it's really getting a working bucket of people who actually pick up the phone. It also tells you who doesn't, so that you can work your leads in the right channel effectively. And we do this on demand for customers, and it allows you to also spend more time better targeting, right? You can actually take the time to research 100 of your super ideal dream account clients, send that to us. We'll tell you, here's the 30 or 40 that actually pick up the phone. Not sure where we got cut off on that piece, so we'll go back a little bit and restart. But
Right.
you're gonna get a list of you're gonna take the time. Let's go back. You're gonna take the time to actually research the 100 dream contacts, right? You send that to us.
Right.
We'll do the heavy lifting to tell you which ones you should call, which ones you shouldn't. You get all that data back so that you can have a working bucket of only people who pick up the phone, and then you can start to test those other channels as you build this list of 100 priorities, if that's what we're looking for. So phone ready leads is a on-demand service that runs buckets faster, cheaper, more efficient than you would internally, and it's going to allow you as a rep or a sales leader to have a team that's about 4 or 5 times more efficient in the top of funnel, right? So reps calling just phone ready leads will literally have a conversation every 4 to 6 dial attempts versus every 30 to 50. Or said differently, that's a 20 to 18 to 30% connect rate on average versus a 0 to 5% or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Right.
Blair, what else would you like to add?
No, I just think that the process of the list as a strategy is your key component. And then as what Ryan has said, when you use a process that actually disqualifies whether you can actually connect with people in a specific channel, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to choose other channels. It also gives you the opportunity, by the way, to figure out whether or not your messaging is actually resonating with those individuals. If you do this properly, you can very quickly, instead of taking months and months, okay, to try and figure out if you're targeting the right individual. In a matter of weeks, you can know. But we can set aside some time for that, and I can show you how our team does this, because that's the exact same situation that happened to us. When we were using phone ready leads, within literally about 5 days, 5 calling days, we figured out that we were calling the wrong list, because we were focused on the completion side and not on the dial side, the actual conversations and the outcome from those conversations. Right. As soon as we were able to get a new list into the system, our completion rate stayed the same, our booking rate tripled, okay? And our unqualifieds fell by at least 100%.
Wow.
So you're talking about, we're talking to the right people. We're now just saying, is the message the right message? And we're getting where we want to get to.
Well, good.
And that's
like
called,
I said earlier,
that's called small business acceleration.
You got it. Like I said earlier, I think we could talk about this for some time. Again, as we talked about in the introduction, Outbound Sales, No Fluff. Ryan is one of the authors. I want to put a plug in for the Audible version. Ryan, I think, did a great job of putting together an Audible version with respect to this book, of interviewing different people related to each of the chapters, and a bonus section of but it was probably one of the most enjoyable Audibles I've been involved with. And it really digs into this whole outbound process stuff, and a lot with respect to targeting. So I encourage people to go do that, as well as, so Ryan, if somebody wants to reach out to you to follow up on this discussion or phone ready leads, how do they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. I appreciate that. By the way, if they like the audiobook, the Audible version, it's now a free podcast. Same exact thing as a podcast. Just give it away. So check out the podcast version of it. It's literally the Audible version of Outbound Sales No Fluff for free. You can Google it. But if they want to get a hold of me, LinkedIn's a great channel. I'm very active there. Or give me a call. My phone number is 415-994-0110. I love phone calls.
And if you read his profile, he says, if you email me, I won't even reach out to you. And trust me, I called him first. That all worked. And then later I went to reconnect and I sent an email, and Blair reminded me he doesn't do email, David. Anyway, but so if you don't take it personal if you send Ryan an email and he doesn't respond, because that's not really the issue, but he'll give him a phone call. He'll get back to you. That's great. Ryan, thank you so much. Blair, anything else?
No, we're good. This is a great session. Great way to kick it off, and really excited about what's going on next.